last but not least, time is pressing, so we have to talk about Ridley Scott's film, which already managed to ruffle some feathers, particularly in France, where the critics have labeled the film as very pro-British and very anti-French. On top of this, the movie has been panned for its many historical inaccuracies. You've seen the film. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I have to admit, I really didn't like it, and I wished I'd have been next door watching kind of Hunger Games 4, I think, which was
Wow.
where the
Okay, you came out
where
guns
where,
blazing.
yeah, my daughter
Interesting.
was watching that with her friend. I thought, okay, I didn't like it. I didn't think actually the British came across that positively. I mean, they came across as I mentioned, as like pantomime tough kind of figures. I thought profoundly unsympathetic in a way, and I didn't like it. I think for a couple of reasons, and one actually is less to do about historical inaccuracy or not, but it was I just thought it was a little bit too ambitious in trying to cover 30 years of his life. So I thought technically that wasn't great in that you just had these kind of like fragments, these episodes going from 1793 to Napoleon's death in 1821. And I think I would have liked to have seen a film which was maybe a little bit more focused and allowed the characters to develop more. So that's almost looking at the film as a non-Napoleonic specialist, as somebody that's actually I quite like kind of
Historical
film
epics.
biographies. Yeah, I do
Yeah.
like them. I should admit I didn't like Gladiator very much, which was Ridley Scott as well.
Okay. I love that
Uh,
movie. Full disclosure.
but I really do like Ridley Scott's The Duelist, which
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
lesser well-known film, 19, which is, I think, his first major film. Which, if you want something which captures the kind of essence of the Napoleonic period, I'd recommend to everyone to watch The Duelist. It's based on a true story as well, which
It's
is
these
great.
two duelists that meet every 10 years, right?
Yeah, or
And then
every
they
few
duel
years,
again
yeah.
every few years or whatever. Right, right. Yeah, it's a
These kind of
fantastic film.
obsessives, when
Yep.
it comes to this cult of honor, which I think infuses the Napoleonic Army. So Ridley Scott knows about the period; he can do the period, but yeah. So I didn't like the way the film was structured, and then I just think it doesn't get the feel right of the period. And yeah, I'm not necessarily a stickler for historical accuracy because I think there's something called artistic license, and you can sometimes take liberties with facts, but then you do speak to a wider or bigger truth, so you can do that. But why have French artillery shell the pyramids? It's
Because it's
kind
a
of a
good shot.
stupid.
It
It's a good
looks
shot, but
amazing.
why do that? Because there's so many amazing things you could have done drawing on what actually happens in the Napoleonic period without doing things like that. I thought those kind of sex scenes with Josephine a bit bizarre. I don't that didn't seem to ring true to me. And this under a dining room table with kind of servants present. I don't think so. Those things just didn't feel kind of authentic to me and were a bit mildly off-putting. I had a bit of a problem. I mean, I like Joaquin Phoenix a lot. I think he's a good actor, but he did seem to me a bit. Well, it's not only old for the role, and of course, remember, Josephine is about 6 years older than Napoleon, whereas when you look at the actors in the film, it's more than reversed. So, is there a bit of a casting issue there? And Napoleon never seems to age. I mean, it's just his kind of like uniform and hat changes a bit, and maybe even worse, he doesn't seem to develop much as a character. I would have liked to have seen more of that. I wouldn't join the French in saying, "Oh, it's just kind of like pro-British," because I think it's in many ways it's just a technically a bit of a disappointing film. I thought, and
Mm.
yeah, I'm sure they see it as just like kind of Gilray and Cruikshank, another Anglo-Saxon kind of whacking the French kind of part of that genre, which I don't think is what Ridley Scott. I don't think the French do they appear that bad. I didn't get. I
I
mean, I think
think,
Napoleon appears bad, but
yeah.
yeah.
Well, this is how Ridley Scott responded to the criticisms about historical accuracy. I do apologize for the profanity, but these are my friend Ridley's words, not mine. He said the
Mm,
following: When I have issues with historians, I ask, "Excuse me, mate, were you there? No? Well, shut the fuck up
mm,
then." I
mm.
mean, that is quite an amusing response.
Yeah.
Not very articulated, but we can't deny that the man's passion is there for the film at least.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good thing. I mean, that's good. And as I say, I respect his knowledge of that period in the field because I've seen The Duelist, which, as I say, is up there with films like Danton, the early 1980s, which I think really captures the sort of terror. So he can do it, but I'm not sure. Well, he says that historians weren't there. I'm glad I wasn't there during those kind of scenes with Napoleon and Josephine getting intimate. um, and of course, yeah, I mean, historians weren't there, but they do read people that were.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, man, it's not a
there's very
serious argument.
it's not serious. And as I say, I mean, I'm not particularly worried if the coronation was it was longer than a few minutes, which is how it's portrayed as. But the idea that Napoleon kind of crowns himself, and he does say not during the ceremony, but in another context, that he picked the crown out of a gutter. I think that was fair. It's good artistic license. It's visually, but it actually gets the essence right. That scene and.
What about the
Um,
battle scenes? What did you think of those?
Um, kind of okay, but again, one measures it with other films, and a film I really like is Waterloo, 1970, and I've forgotten the director's name. I think a Ukrainian
I haven't seen
director.
it.
And Rod Steiger plays Napoleon in that, and Christopher Plummer is Wellington. Basically, the whole film, or most of the film, is devoted to the Battle of Waterloo, and that is filmed using, I think, a large number of extras are actually provided by the Soviet army, believe it or not, including authentic cavalry units. And those battle scenes are absolutely amazing. They've got that kind of scale, that grandeur, but they also somehow haven't got that AI generated kind of look about them. Now, I don't know to what extent that was used in Ridley Scott. So, yeah, kind of okay, but there are a lot of them, and yeah, there are inaccuracies in some of those too. I think Waterloo is. I had the pleasure of actually visiting the battlefield earlier in the year, and Wellington is very good at using the reverse slope, so he kind of like concentrates most of his army behind a slope, so you can't see it. That wasn't done in the film. So yeah, I mean, you make of that of what you will.
What about the ice lake scene? That was not a real thing, was it?
It wasn't, but I think something like that happens either at Eylau or Friedland, which is
I see.
1807.
Okay.
So,
So there is
where
some authenticity
where
to that.
you do get some Napoleonic battles where people kind of fall into freezing water, and,
Mm.
and the French retreat at Berezina is like that. So, fair enough. I would say that's within the parameters of artistic license. And I mean, what is good is it shows the real horrors of war, and it shows you the heroism, but also the bloodshed. And I think that is for me a more interesting balance to kind of strike, because yeah, we live in an age which is uh, it has a very low kind of tolerance threshold for that kind of thing. But on the other hand, at the time, you did have this kind of cult of glory and heroism. And I think you have to kind of recognize that. And I think the film brings that out. And yeah, the uniforms are spectacular, and the cavalry. What I don't like about some of the older films is I'm sure a lot of horses die in making some of those early, crippled. And I'm sure that these days that kind of authenticity isn't allowed. Ethically wouldn't be approved, and thank God for that.
One of the main problems I had with the film was that Joaquin Phoenix's choice to portray him as this kind of almost a boring little average Joe or something, who's devoid of any charisma and who just happens to be good at fighting. And I love Joaquin Phoenix. Usually, he's one of
Mm,
my
mm,
favorite actors. So that was
mm,
a choice that he made, an artistic choice they made with the director probably.
mm,
But I have
mm.
trouble believing that if Napoleon was this sort of almost like a drab apparatchik or something, hundreds of thousands would follow him to the ends of the earth, literally. Like
Yeah.
it didn't seem credible.
Yeah, that was that I thought as well. Why would people in large numbers follow him, as you say, to the ends of the earth, and sacrifice themselves, willingly? And you get this, there's a degree of memoir literature and letters and correspondence that survives from the Napoleonic army, and you get these kind of like comments, we loved our marshals, but the emperor we worshipped as a god, and those kind of like things. And yeah, I couldn't worship that Napoleon which we were exposed to over the last few days. As you say, he's a bit weird in certain ways, and not in a positive sense. I think, yeah, if I were Napoleon, I would not like that film myself, because it, everyone is a balance, I guess, of negative and positive kind of characteristics are seen by outsiders, and I think there was a little bit too much on the negative, and maybe the positive maybe not enough there. So
Hmm.
maybe I'd be a little bit with the French on that part, yeah, of their criticism.
In the film, he's quite humorless, and I wanted to ask you this before. Did Napoleon have a sense of humor?
I think you could do sarcasm, if you call that. It's the lowest form of
I
humor,
do,
isn't
yeah.
it? They say,
Okay, it is a
yeah.
form of humor. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that calling Talleyrand a pile of shit in silk stockings is pretty cool, because I think it does to an extent sum him up. That kind of elegance, but inside he can be a bit shitty and a bit
That's pretty awesome, to
yeah.
be honest. We can take that box.
Normally, Talleyrand was quite good at kind of those kind of insults as well. He's bon mot, but
Hmm.
then he got outgunned on that particular occasion.
Hey, thank you for listening. First and foremost, a massive, massive thank you to my producers, Lorenzo, Jurechuk, Carmen, Veronica, Mila, and Taichi. You legends rock. Without you, this podcast would not have been possible at all. Thank you so much. For the rest of you, if you enjoyed listening to the episode, please follow and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And of course, if you'd like to become a patron as well, go to Patreon, type Smart Cookies in there, and become one. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.